Hey everybody, Derek and Ryan here from Badgerland Birding. We didn't coordinate wearing red, but it's just a brother thing, I guess. But we're here to talk about a few interesting articles with you today. And the first one that we're going to be talking about is this new wind turbine thing that they came out with not too long ago. So the basic idea of it was that they had the wind turbines that were killing a lot of birds. And so there was a study that came out where they painted just one of the blades black, and it apparently reduced bird deaths by a lot. So I'm going to read a little bit from that article here.
First of all, though, we decided we wanted to do this because we could talk about some interesting things in the bird community, and I wanted to call it Let's Chat and have the logo be a yellow-breasted chat because it's like our spirit bird, apparently.
Indeed. So here is the article. It said, study recently published in Ecology and Evolution found that painting the blades on wind turbines black reduced annual bird fatality rates by over 70% compared to neighboring unpainted turbines. And so the fatalities occur when they collide with the arms and they have trouble detecting them because it's like just a motion blur.
I always kind of wondered about that, though. How is it that they can avoid other things that move kind of quickly, like when tree branches sway quickly in breezes and stuff, and yet they can't avoid?
Maybe they're just getting smacked by tree branches, but they survive it.
Well, don't you find it a little odd, though, that they don't kind of at least have some sense that there's something there?
Well, I mean, so this study is basically telling you that if it's darker, if it's a darker color, that they have a better time sensing it. So it might just be color-based then.
Did it have any numbers in there for like how many birds usually get killed by wind turbines and what the reduction rate was?
Yeah, we'll get to it. So first of all, certain types of birds responded differently. So raptors, which are apparently especially susceptible to this, had the highest decrease in fatality. And then in this area, there were no white-tailed eagle carcasses. This was in Norway. So
That's a big one.
yeah, this was people had a lot of thoughts on like if this was actually worth doing, because it says, well, it was effective at reducing bird deaths. They said the solution was demanding because the paint had to be applied to pre-existing wind turbines during calm weather with a team that had rappelling experience. So it'd be a lot easier if they did this before they actually put the turbines up.
So does that mean they're kind of considering just leaving whichever ones they had?
Yeah.
Here on out.
I mean, it's been a contentious issue for a while. So we'll.
How so has it been contentious, though?
Because they know that it has been killing birds.
And they just don't care. Like the Minnesota Vikings who built that.
I'm sure people care. It's kind of, I'm sure it's a give and take. But so
you
the
have
US
that environmentalism, let's get all the wind power and then let's also kill the birds as we do it.
So the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service estimated that roughly 300,000 birds were killed by wind turbines in 2015. 300,000 birds. But,
that's a lot.
But apparently, another study estimates wind power killed some 500,000 birds, and more than 800,000 bats died in collisions with wind turbines.
Wow, I didn't know that was a problem for bats too, because they even have echolocation and they can't figure it out apparently.
Yeah, and then
I just actually had a thought about this. How many of these are probably happening at night for birds? Because a lot of them migrate at night. I just assumed it was like.
I don't even know if the black would help though.
That's a good point, actually.
So, but it gets even more depressing. So, for writing for BBC's Future Planet, Brian Hogan pointed out the figures remain far lower than the total killed by power lines in the U.S., which a 2014 paper estimated maybe between 12 and 64 million.
Are you kidding me?
This is what it says.
Birds are killed by power lines?
But wait, house cats are estimated to kill 1.3 to 4 billion birds annually.
Billion?
That's
just depressing. I mean, we already knew about
keep the cats inside. Let's just do that.
That's crazy, though.
That's a good start.
There's a lot of very startling things that you just said, though, in that article. Feels like now wind turbines are the least of our problems when it comes to conservation. I didn't know. I knew that cats were very adept killers of other animals, but I did not know they took out bird numbers in the billions. That's very shocking.
Yeah, it's not great. So I still
hopeful stuff in the article.
Well, the hopeful thing is that painting one of the blades black might help reduce deaths. But I still know that habitat loss is the biggest factor for decline in species. So
yeah, I mean, it sounds like there's a lot of different things kind of at work here. It's just really startling how the numbers are so big. And how do they estimate these numbers anyway?
For this study?
I mean, I don't know if you know in the article, but like, how do they decide how many billions of birds are killed by cats?
I assume well, yeah, I don't know about the house cats, but I assume for like the wind turbines, they just go underneath the turbines and like
do a count and then probably extrapolate it based on everything.
Yeah, or it might just be, they might not even have to kind of like estimate, they might just be able to tell. But I'm sure there's a lot of room for error.
So basically what we can glean from this article is we should probably just try and paint the wind turbines black. If it can reduce it all, I would think that it would be a good thing. And
I would say for new ones for sure.
If you do have people out there rappelling, trained rappellers, that gives them some job cushion.
Yeah, I don't know how many rappellers are out there looking for work.
Well, if there's at least one, then that person's in a much better position than they would have been before this.
Yeah, so this particular article was in Smithsonian Magazine, and we'll post a link to that in the description so you guys can read it. And let us know what your thoughts are on this study. Real interesting topic, kind of weird because I feel like the whole headline is like, this is great, but then it exposes this whole like world of other issues that birds have and threats that they face.
Yeah, this is kind of a personal opinion question. Do you think it's worth having the wind-powered energy at the expense of how many birds are killed?
I mean, I don't, but
worth owning a cat with how many birds are killed.
You can own a cat, just keep your cat inside.
That seems like that's like a trigger issue. If you tell somebody to keep their cat inside, a lot of times they'll just go off on you.
I know what I'm doing saying this. I know the risks.
We're going to lose subscribers who are like, I love birds, but I also love cats being outside.
Man. And there's so many like feral cat populations in countries too, where it's not even like people letting the cat outside. It's just like there's all these cats and they just keep breeding. And
that is true. I mean, a lot of those places too are probably in, really urban areas and like Asia.
And that's like probably the least of their worries are their house cats.
Probably, yeah. I know what you're talking about though. With dogs are like that too, but I don't think they kill as many birds. I would assume, just because
I don't think they do.
Much better at hunting in the wild than dogs do for birds.
Which is surprising because I've seen some large cats do some hunting, and you'd think you'd see that like a tank coming at you if you were a bird.
Yeah, that is also true. I don't know. But let's move on to our second topic, which is also sort of depressing. But it's also kind of a hot button issue, which is the culling of cormorants, which is something that what agency has decided they're going to start doing it? Do you remember?
So I don't know if it was a specific agency, but one of the articles that I looked at was in Canada, and they just had this like, let me pull it up. A lot of fishermen were upset because they see these cormorants stealing their fish and feeling like they are degrading the ecosystem.
Right. And a lot of it actually isn't even necessarily wild fish, but it's actually the fisheries where they're trying to raise fish inland. I think that I read an article that said that cormorants have cost the catfish industry in Mississippi alone between $10 million and $25 million. Really.
It's like they can't help it that they're good at their feeding,
Right. So, and that's one of the arguments is that they're not an invasive species, so they're technically protected by the Migratory Bird Treaty Act.
So this article was in Ontario, and it said a proposal by the Ford government to allow year-round hunting of the demonized birds as over aesthetics and other concerns by the commercial fishing industry will wipe them out, say activists.
So they're saying that if we do this, it could wipe out the double-crested cormorant?
That's what activists are saying.
I mean, I think there's some truth to that, honestly, because when you think about those birds that have such great numbers in their population, you think of like passenger pigeon, Carolina parakeet, sandhill crane when they were very close to being in the red with being endangered. I think that whenever there's a surplus of birds or any animal like that and people feel it's just okay to take them out, that a lot of times it swings way the other way and they end up in some trouble as a
I
species.
feel like it's a big part of it is having that reputation. You know, like once an animal gets a reputation as being trash, like you see this with fish all the time, like gar being seen as a trash fish, even though they're like a predator that's mostly a scavenger. They're not taking out a ton
So
of
you're
big fish.
already deciding to hijack our bird talk with your gar stuff.
I gotta bring up some gar, but they're labeled as trash fish, so people just toss them.
Well, why don't you at least say why you know so much about gar now?
So I'm in Louisiana right now. I'm working on my master's in the gar lab, so we're doing a bunch of gar research. But back to
you
what we were saying.
gar into every conversation, like, oh,
I'm
this
thinking about gar a lot. So
parable that I heard about alligator gar.
But if people see cormorants as trashy birds, they're more likely to like shoot them. Just, oh, it's okay. It's the justification of it.
Right,
So
and I
listen
think
to
that's
this.
what happened with the passenger pigeon was that people knew there were tons of them, so they would just go out all day and shoot them.
Right, exactly. So I got to pull this in from this article. I'm probably going to butcher a lot of pronunciations here, but this is how this article starts out. Toulouse-Lautrec was fascinated by the Japanese tradition of ukai, in which fishermen train cormorants to retrieve fish in rivers. The fishermen place a ring around the bird's neck to prevent them from swallowing the larger fish. After a day of fishing together, Tom would accompany Toulouse-Lautrec on a leash into a nearby cafe where the artist and cormorant would share a drink of absinthe and presumably trip out together. And then his quote is, "It has developed a taste for the stuff. It takes after me."
Well, that raises just a lot more questions than I had coming in and really contributes nothing to what we were saying.
Well, it's
was that going somewhere?
Like,
saying like if maybe we should own them as pets instead of shoot them.
I think it's just saying they've been around with humans for a long time.
Yeah, what's interesting about the cormorant too is that their population actually took a huge hit because of what was it that the eagles were having trouble with their eggs also?
DDT.
DDT made a lot of their eggs too soft and they got crushed. So there was a point in time where they were really decreasing in numbers and then they rebounded again. And so we already kind of saw their population is still way down compared to how it used to be though. Audubon said that you could go outside during migration and see millions upon millions of them flying through the sky. And you can still see a good number of them now, but that population is nothing like what it used to be.
Yeah, that makes sense. This is also interesting, kind of off topic too, but it says in the Old Testament, cormorant is a symbol of apocalyptic doom. Among the 20 birds considered detestable and ritually unclean by ancient Hebrews, and not to be eaten on account of the fact they consume flesh. In the 1950s,
a lot of things, though.
It says in the 1950s, cormorants were commonly referred to as the N-word bird and N-word goose. A negative view of the bird persists, including in Ontario, where campaigns to call them in provincial parks have been ongoing for the last 2 decades. So that happened, that has been going on, and then the Doug Ford government proposed to allow hunting from March 15th to December 31st across the province, which not only includes the breeding season, but represents the entire time the birds are present in the province. So it sounds like a free-for-all.
Yeah, and I think initially they gave 13 states the rights to shoot them when they were on their property, like fisheries property, and trying to eat their fish, because there's a lot of different methods you can try to use to dissuade cormorants from coming to those places. So they even use like those wacky inflatable arm-filling tube men to try and scare them away. But I guess they just kept coming back anyway. So yeah, there's not a whole lot that they could do with them.
So when you say 13 states, do you mean states in the US?
Yeah, originally when they started to make it more legalized to hunt them or to kill them, it was 13 states in the US, I believe, in the South and the East, that they allowed legal killing of them to start.
Gotcha. I feel like it's always a very slippery slope when you start doing this kind of thing. That's the same way that I feel about people who want to hunt sandhill cranes. It's like, I feel like we've just watched them recover. Like, why would we want to put them in peril again?
I feel like this is actually even worse though, because there's kind of a general lack of respect for the bird. Like a sandhill crane, people want to hunt because they want to eat them. Well, I mean, most people, it seems like that's what they're trying to say they would do with birds. But with these cormorants, it seems like people just go out and kill them for sport, which I think is more dangerous to the population.
Yeah. So a Carleton University biologist, Stephen Cook, warns there are cascading risks to the broader ecosystem if you remove cormorants. Like everything is connected. So if you take one thing out of there, it's going to change everything.
Well, also it's worth noting that people that are refuting the cormorant hunting say that there's no evidence that they even have a negative impact or noticeably negative impact on wild fisheries anyway. So they're saying that it's not really going to do a whole lot to decrease the cormorant population because the dent they make in the fish population is still small, even though cormorants can eat a lot of fish at a time and their colonies are still huge. I mean, you remember, oh wait, you weren't actually there on Cat Island in Green Bay. We went there and we saw how many cormorants were on this one kind of island out there, and it was kind of shocking. So I'm assuming the areas around there probably got pretty fished by them, but the conservationists say that the humans have had way more of a negative impact on fisheries, which I think has to be true with how many tons of fish are taken out of the oceans every day. And I'm assuming the Great Lakes and other sources of water also.
Yeah. So talking about them not knowing the impact on the fish, some people, I believe this was the same biologist, Stephen Cook, was saying the very fish species people care about the most could end up those being most negatively affected by a call, because if you remove some of the predatory pressure, you might see increases in population size that stress the fish populations. And so like you can hypothesize what's going to happen, but you're not really going to know until it actually is occurring.
Right. And
So
I feel
it's just like playing with fire.
Purpose in the ecosystem for sure. I'm sure they control some fish populations that if we didn't have as many cormorants, all of a sudden we would see a boom in some stuff that would probably edge out other species. Like it would be interesting to see a study about what cormorants do with the round goby population or what they do with the alewife population, because I'm assuming that a lot of the sport fish can only really be taken by cormorants when they're a little bit on the smaller side.
Yeah, I know that round goby is actually a carrier of avian botulism and has caused some issues to that effect. Perfect. Yeah. But in this article, which it was in Now, it says they do feed on round goby and alewife.
I know there's a lot of them by the Great Lakes, but I think they're one of the only cormorant species that's actually inland in the United States. And I think I saw that's the only one that they're really looking for people to be able to hunt. But I highly doubt most people are going to know the difference between neotropic cormorant and a double-crested cormorant.
Oh yeah, there's no way.
Like just the average guy who's like, I'm gonna go out and kill some cormorants today, he's gonna be like, that one's slightly smaller. And look at that.
No, he's not. Nobody's gonna notice. They'll just be like, hey, I got one.
He's like, look at that acute angle on the gular of that there double-crested.
Yeah, I'm sure that's how it's gonna go down. I agree though that it's mostly the lack of respect for, like, when a creature gets that bad reputation, it just opens up a whole lot of people are justifying their actions through that. Because we see the same thing with big-headed silver carp, which are the invasive ones. And that, like, in that case, they are invasive. They're not supposed to be here. But, you know, people go out there and they, like, hit them with trash cans as they're up in the air, and they shoot them with bows. And it's, like, more of a sport, and people feel like it's guilt-free whatever because they just say, oh, it's invasive. But it'd be a shame for that to happen to native species.
Yeah, I mean, it's also worth noting, too, that I'm assuming it's not just cormorants that would get caught in the crossfire. If people are out there shooting at large colonies of seabirds and things like that, I'm sure some other stuff is going to get killed that isn't even a cormorant. This was an issue that they had when they were trying to control the cormorant population by destroying their eggs, because they would often cause more damage to other avian populations than they would the cormorants anyway.
Yeah, that's true for sure. It's just like, I don't know why we have to keep relearning these same things. Like, can't we just learn from the passenger pigeon that, like, we shouldn't do this stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure back then the passenger pigeon was looked at as kind of a trash bird. You know,
I guarantee that if the passenger pigeon was around in the numbers that they were back then, we would be like, there's no way that this thing is ever going away.
We'd be like, let's cull them.
I mean, we'd be like, they're literally going to be here forever. There's no way you're getting rid of all of them. Because they talked about flocks that would go overhead for like hours. Hours.
I mean, if humans can get rid of that many birds to the point that they become extinct, they could do the same thing to any species. Also, it's kind of a slippery slope too, because then what else do you want to cull? Like, you could make a strong case to
feral cats.
Oh, I mean, that's a different thing. That would require more time to get into, I think.
Well, then you can have the same to like, what if we get rid of the house cat population?
Well, I'm saying from a bird perspective, like, let's get rid of house sparrows. Like, that's a no-brainer. Let's get rid of cowbirds. That's a native species that now has parasitized a lot of other species.
Well, so first of all, I'm not saying we should call feral cats, just to throw
You did say it.
I'm saying some people think that we should. But even the house sparrow is like, is it, like, at what point is it considered native? That it's been here for a while. Question. We're not getting rid of it. At what point do we just accept it? I don't think I don't want to go out there to shoot house sparrows. Like, that's not what I want. Since
chances are, if you're shooting a house sparrow, you're going to be hitting a house if you miss, or even if you get it.
That's just like, I don't want to go out and like cull anything really, but they are destructive for like bluebirds and stuff like that.
Right, but that's kind of what I'm saying, is that at what point do we decide that the nature in which a species is destructive does not outweigh getting rid of it, the cost of getting rid of it?
Well, honestly, it just seems like when it's not bothering people, people are okay with it, and when it does bother people, people aren't okay with it. Because if the cormorants were there, well, people say they're ruining the aesthetic because they don't think they're like attractive birds, but they
aren't really the most attractive looking bird.
Their eyes are beautiful. Have you seen a cormorant's eye?
To their eyes as much.
Well, maybe you should try it.
Okay.
But if they weren't, if they weren't bothering the fish, and they were like a macaw, they were like red with beautiful plumage, and they weren't eating the fish, people would probably love them. They'd be like, yeah, let's get some tourists in here to see these things.
Well, you kind of actually just described what's going on in Pasadena with the parrots.
I know.
But aren't there people there that still were like, let's get rid of them? I remember comments on the video. People were like, get rid of them all, kill them all and stuff. So, I mean, people just have that Culling instinct. They just want stuff.
So this is in reference to a video that I made in California called Mystery of the Pasadena Parrots. And there's a bunch of feral parrot populations there, but some of those populations that are thriving are endangered where they're from. So it's kind of the situation where it's like, well, they're not native here. What do we do? They're like threatened or endangered where they're actually from. And so people have varying opinions where they're like, we should kill them, like we should leave them. They're very noisy though. So people do get bothered by the noise. But like I was saying, it's when it inconveniences people is when they're like, oh, we got to do something about it.
Yeah, I think it's also worth looking at it from the perspective of what happens if a native species does get too out of control with its population as well. So, I mean, things do change in the natural world because of human intervention. So with the bird feeding that happens now, the cowbird, like I talked about before, doesn't even need to really go travel with cows, rendering its breeding where it lays its eggs in other birds' nests to be kind of useless at this point.
Is that confirmed that they did travel with cows? Because I was doing some research and it sounded like they weren't 100% on that theory.
I don't know if it's confirmed or not. I don't want to say that it is and then be wrong. I would have to do more research about it, but I thought that was kind of the accepted idea of what cowbirds.
That's what I had heard. I don't know how much validity there is in there,
but I wonder how much of the cormorant population has boomed because people just make these fisheries now where cormorants can just go get easy meals. Because I did read that more cormorants are staying north now because there's more places where they can find fish during the winter time. They don't have to migrate as far.
So that actually kind of reminds me of the Canada goose. Because when our parents were young, they said they had to go to Horicon Marsh to see Canada geese, which sounds hilarious because now they terrorize college campuses and hiss at students.
Freshwater cattail moth.
I did know that. Yeah, now they're on like college campuses everywhere, hissing at students and like.
Yeah, they're all over. You can't go to a public park that has water without stepping in goose poop.
Yeah, some people would say that, we should do something about that too.
Yeah, that's kind of the whole idea for me, is that once you start saying this population has expanded beyond what is useful anymore and you start trying to kill it, that's a very difficult thing to stop.
Yeah, well, and two, like the reputation. If it starts getting a bad reputation, it's going to continue and people are going to pass that on to their children. And
remember when we used to go out and shoot cormorants with Grandpa?
Yeah, that could be like what's passed down.
Those were the good old days. Or they went extinct.
It's a possibility for sure. One of the nice things about cormorants is they seem to have a pretty expansive range though. So, if Canada starts allowing this, hopefully it's not gonna affect the whole population.
I mean, you see though how, especially in nesting sites for bird species, once that nesting habitat or once the populations around the nesting area start to decrease, it really hinders the rest of the population from growing.
Yeah, it does.
But I would be interested to hear other people's opinions on this. I mean, I'm not trying to make a case one way or another. Obviously, we love birds and we don't like seeing them be killed in general, but I'd be interested to see if anybody has any good points one way or another. And I know that it's a hot button issue, and I know that culling feral cats is a hot button issue. So it'd be interesting to kind of dig into those even deeper sometime. But I wanted you to actually tell everybody about the interesting thing that you're doing this week.
Yeah, so I in Louisiana I posted about being new here and wanting some good birding places to go, and I actually got contacted by someone who's doing some work looking for ivory-billed woodpeckers, which just kind of floored me because that's been something that I wanted to look into for a while. And it sounds like we're going to be looking at some property for these birds. So the researcher I'm going with is pretty confident that they're still around and has, some evidence of ones that he's heard. And so I don't want to say too much about it because I don't know how much is supposed to be like confidential, but it kind of reminds me of a Sasquatch hunt where like everybody's like is just 100% sure they're extinct, but you have a couple like dedicated people like, nope, they're for sure out here. So I'm really curious to see how that's going to go and to hear some more of the stories about that.
So is there going to be a Badgerland birding episode about this adventure?
100%, maybe even more than one episode. We'll see how it goes.
Wow.
It'd be like amazing to get a picture.
Proof.
I don't know, man. That would be the most insane thing ever.
You'll be like that guy in that commercial. I don't even remember what it's commercial for, where he's like up to the cavity of an ivory-billed woodpecker and he gets his camera out because it's just staring at him, and then it like doesn't work or something, and then it just flies away.
Was that a commercial?
Yeah, that was a commercial. That was this year.
But it's interesting because people I talked to down here, they were like, one guy I talked to was like, yeah, I saw one when I was a kid and my dad like told me to come outside and was like, this is a really rare bird. And I always wonder if they're actually pileated. A lot of people are, no. I'm wondering if it's like actually pileated woodpeckers people are seeing. So I'm not going to be convinced until I actually see some evidence or get a picture or something.
So on a scale of 1 to 10, how certain is this guy?
He seems like 10. He's like,
he's that certain?
Yeah, he's like, nope, they're out there.
Interesting.
But when you're down here, like the area I'm in is very quiet. Like, I and the bayou is so expansive that it definitely makes you think that there's things out here that people don't know about.
So you do realize that if you succeed in getting evidence of the ivory-billed woodpecker, that you may hold the title of the biggest ornithological discovery this century?
It'd definitely be a team effort. I'm hopeful we get something, but we'll see.
You'd probably be on the cover of like every single bird magazine.
What's gonna happen is I'm gonna end up quitting everything else I'm doing and just 100% ivory-billed search for the rest of my life, and then be like 90, and then say I have these pictures and they're going to be these really blurry like phone videos.
It's going to be like just of a tree. It'll just be a tree. And you'll be like, he's in there.
Yeah, it's like the Bigfoot researchers. I don't understand. I'm like, yeah, I've been researching Sasquatches for like 20 years. And it's like, here's a phone video I took. It's like you couldn't have updated your equipment.
Yeah, that's a good point. Or like, yeah, I saw one the other day, but I didn't have my camera. It's like, if you're researching something like that, have your camera maybe just rolling have like 6 cameras with you. Like do whatever it takes to get evidence of it.
Yeah, so I'm excited about that, and we'll definitely be keeping you guys updated. We're also rolling out our Texas and Oklahoma trip. We just released a birding Stillwater video, so we'll be releasing some more videos from that trip as well. We got a lot of cool stuff ready for you guys. So if you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe and check out some of the videos we've been doing.
Yeah, and we hope that you liked this first ever edition of Let's Chat, and hopefully we'll do it again soon, make it like a weekly or bi-weekly thing. But yes, make sure to subscribe to the channel, give us a like on Facebook. And do we have an Instagram now? I feel like I saw that an Instagram was created.
I feel like I made one, but I don't know if there's anything on it.
We're going to have to start Instagram up again, share some photos and whatnot.
Yeah, we do have a TikTok too.
Do we?
If you're on TikTok. Yeah, you can do that.
Oh, maybe I didn't know that. But the Instagram caught me by surprise because it recommended things on my Instagram.
So if you have topics of things you want us to talk about or articles, feel free to post them in the comments and we'll do our best to get to them.
Yep. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next time.